Talking baseball, baseball and the O's.
Oh, welcome back, Birdland, to another episode of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. I am, of course, your host, Benny Becker. Absolutely thrilled to be with you ganged here today. We have a fantastic episode on our hands. It's been a little bit about a week since our last episode, and you know I hate to take these longer breaks. You know I'm trying to pump out these episodes every other day, every series at the very least, but sometimes you need to take a step back when big things are occurring in the franchise. I wanted time to take a step back, get my mind right, get my thoughts together, figure out really how I feel about everything as a large-scale picture. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about more today on the episode. Certainly, we're going to dig into specifics, but as far as the games go, we have 7 that we need to catch up on, and we're not going to dig deep into the actual games or the moments or the situations or certain players performed on this day while others didn't perform on that day. Whatever it may be, we're going to run down those games kind of as a breakthrough, kind of touch on the important moments and really the takeaways, if nothing more, from those series, instead of actual, like I said, those individual moments that happen throughout every single game, like we normally do. But for this episode, we have 7 very important games to catch up on, so I don't want to dig too much on specifics. I want to just talk about the lessons we learned off of these series and how we feel. So after that, we have big news, unfortunate news, to talk about how this streak has ended at 106. Very unfortunate. Also unfortunate news that we have to touch on are the recent injuries to John Means and Dean Kremer, and we're going to talk about not only those injuries, what they mean, and how we feel about moving forward with them. However, we're also going to be talking about kind of where the rotation feels after this, how it all shakes out, and what this means for the Orioles short-term and long-term. We also have a couple other moves where we have guys that we really enjoyed having on the club. Personally, I was big believers in coming into the year. Unfortunately, are no longer with this club, so want to touch on that because I'm a little upset by it, even if by no means is it an overall negative probably for this team and its overall performance moving forward. So we also want to touch on maybe a young stud prospect possibly coming up, the path for Povich to maybe make this roster. That goes hand in hand with our conversation on where the rotation stands now with Means and Kremer on the shelf, at least for the moment. Want to highlight Kyle Bradish and really overall Bradish, Burns, and Grayrod and the trio and how unbelievable they have been. But also focusing in on Bradish and how he's truly coming back to form, and it's a beautiful thing to see, and a huge, huge X factor for these Orioles. Just the 3 of those starting pitchers together is an unbelievable X factor for these Orioles moving forward. We also want to talk about how the wheels have been in motion. The running game seems to have come back to these Orioles, and you have to love to see it. Need to highlight Jorge Mateo and how he's really taken second base, man. He's made it his for the moment at the very least. And it's an unbelievable thing to see. He's a player coming into the season we talk so highly of, even though it looked like he might be on the outs of the roster. We continue to talk about how important he was moving forward in this championship pursuit. So we're going to really highlight how good of a job Jorge, as they call him, has been doing recently. Also, we want to continue talking about the potential trade for a closer and maybe setup man, maybe just high leverage reliever. I really think that more than anything is where the Orioles are going to, for sure, add at least 1, if not 2 names at some point before the trade deadline. And I kind of just want to talk about it. There was an article written in The Athletic kind of touching on it, and I believe they have it wrong. So I'm going to talk about all of that at a certain point. And also, we want to kind of just keep you up to date on where the schedule falls once we get through Boston. You know, we talked the first 36 games so hard in the beginning of the year and in spring training, and we got past those exactly where we wanted to be at 24-12. And afterwards, we said this was kind of a much tougher stretch coming up. But as soon as we got there and we looked at it, we were like, oh, you know, that first half, or at least first third, doesn't seem as bad as it did before the season started. Well, we're moving to the back half, the back 2/3 of that part of the schedule, and it's still brutal. So we're going to want to touch on that and tell you what is to come because, frankly, while it's been a bit of an uncomfortable month as an Orioles fan, and certainly a bit of an uncomfortable week at times this past week, I really think that we might have another month of not being comfortable, folks. So we might as well get used to it. And truly, we have the ball club that we can remain confident in and will perform, I truly believe, at an elite level through maybe this murderer's row, if you will, stretch of season that we have in front of us. All of that in good time, folks. All of that to come. Let's go back, way back, to a week ago, back to the St. Louis series. I know nobody in Birdland wants to go back to St. Louis, but in our minds, just for a little bit, let's go back. We know they dropped the first game, a game they could have taken, and it just didn't work out for them. Well, as probably we all know, if you're sitting here watching this, you probably already know the Orioles ended up getting swept in that St. Louis series, losing all 3 games to St. Louis. The last 2, they lost 3-1 and 5-4. Right there in both games, truly. In fact, I could make the argument they felt like we were going to win at least halfway through the game. It felt like our game to win. And I truly believe that had we had maybe a little bit better luck, we would have won at least one of those 3, and the sweepless streak would continue. Unfortunately, it ended in St. Louis at 106 games, and we're going to touch on that more. Once we get past these games and series, we're going to touch on what that means, how to feel about the Orioles getting swept for the first time in over 2 years. But why do I think that happened, right? Again, what is the takeaway from that St. Louis series? Well, one, this is what I've been telling people, and it's true. The last 2 years, despite the fact that St. Louis has been pretty terrible overall, they played the AL East very tough. Okay, so we're right in that mix. They're playing a lot of good teams in that AL East these last 2 years. And they still somehow remain to have a very good record against them. So kudos to the Cardinals for finding a way to play teams that they don't play very often and are really good teams pretty hard and play them well. And unfortunately, we fell victim to that as well. St. Louis in and of itself is never really an easy place to go and play if you're not really used to going and playing there. Okay, there's kind of this mystique about it. Certainly, we did not have good weather, and that's a part of it, a big part of it that we'll get to. But certainly, St. Louis can have its weather issues. You're not familiar with the stadium. You're not familiar with the ballpark, the whatever it may be. St. Louis has that weird vibe, right? So I'm not going to overreact to that. And truthfully, like we said, the weather played a huge factor, at least in my mind. So if you go back to the 2 games, the final 2 games of that series, game 2, we were tied 1-1, but it felt like Bradish had another inning or 2 in the tank. It felt like we were going to find a way to get up and end up winning that game, at least to me. I had very good vibes and feelings that we were going to take that game at a certain point. Unfortunately, the rain just started pouring out of nowhere. Skies opened up on us, and they had to postpone it to finish the next day. So when we came back that next day to finish the game, just didn't go our way. St. Louis got up almost instantly, and it just ended there, 3-1. is what it is. But then we have that next game, and we're like, okay, still feeling good, gang. Still feeling good. Still liked our chances, obviously. And really thought that we were going to come away with that win. Unfortunately, we're winning, and then the rains hit again. I don't know if it was after the 4th inning or 5th inning, something along those lines. The rains hit again, and while it wasn't the craziest rain delay, I believe it was at least an hour or so, give or take. Ultimately, as soon as we come back, Cardinals just start putting up runs, chipping away, getting the lead, and end up winning the game off of that. It looked like for a second we were going to be able to steal it. Didn't happen, unfortunately. So we end up losing all 3 in St. Louis. And certainly that's an easy time to hit the panic button, gang. That's an easy time as a fan to be like, oh, we've been seeing not great baseball the last month, and like, even though they've been winning, and this is the time to let it all erupt, all of that frustration for maybe a month, if not really all season, of the Orioles not playing their best baseball. That's an easy moment to erupt. You're 4 games back of the Yankees at that point. You're staring your first losing, or your first sweep in the eyes in over 2 years. It'd be very easy for especially a young team to kind of be like, ugh, really start even more trying to grasp at what's left of last year and losing whatever was left of last year. Like, it's very easy to mentally get in your own head and try to do even more. And sometimes in baseball, that's not the way. It's like when you're getting taught to hold a baseball bat, right? They say hold it loosely. If you grip it tight, you're never going to get a hit. But if you hold it loosely, that's when you get a hit. And baseball is all about that looseness. You have to play loose. Can't play tight. And it would be very easy on this Orioles team to have, at that point, really tighten themselves up and stop playing with this loose, fun energeticness that they've shown us the past 2 seasons. That's not what the Orioles did, because they're a much better team than the teams that would do that, right? The Orioles then come back and, listen, life's about timing. Life, in many ways, is about timing. And the idea that we get to play the White Sox, the worst team in baseball, on a 4-game set, even in Chicago, coming off of that sweep is a blessing. Was a blessing. And even though the Orioles didn't always look great and truly almost blew at least 2, if not 3, of the games in that White Sox series, they come away with a 4-game sweep coming right out of St. Louis when they lost 3 straight to the Cardinals. Unbelievable. Unbelievable to not only get those 3 games right back, but then get a game above 500 in that 7-game stretch. It's what great teams do, and you can only play the teams on your schedule when they're scheduled. So it was just dumb luck that we happened to fall into the worst team in baseball, who just experienced a couple more injuries like they've been dealing with all season. And we really played well. Again, almost blew it at times, didn't still play our best baseball. But overall, you saw at least the offense put it on their shoulders and say, we got to do better, gang. We have to do better. And one thing I believe you really saw in that White Sox series that was better than what they did in St. Louis, what was better than really what they had done in the series before, Seattle, Toronto, Arizona, Washington, really for the last month, okay? All of May, it felt like the Orioles had stopped taking good at-bats. It's something the broadcast talked about almost nightly. It just, sometimes when you get so much success early, like this offense did for a while, you start just thinking, oh, it's easy. I'll just go up, I'll get a pitch, I'll swing, and I'll hit it. You got to work your at-bats. You have to work the pitchers. You have to work their pitch counts. Not only does it benefit you in that at-bat, But every single batter after you benefits from it as well. The pitcher now has a higher pitch count. He's now more tired throughout the inning. He ultimately is showing his stuff more to not just the person up, but everybody else watching, right? The coaching staff, the players, everybody. So the more times you can have him try and throw that 2-strike slider, well, now we're starting to get a better read on it, even from the dugout. Now we're starting to feel better. Now the guy, even if he got out, is coming back to the dugout going, look for this here. Watch it, and then drop. And watch whatever he's seeing and relaying that information. And more than that, maybe the biggest thing is of all, outside of maybe getting runs off of it, is giving your pitcher a little bit of time on the bench to relax, catch his breath, refocus, figure out how he's really going to attack the batters in the next inning in live time. Because maybe that changed from the pregame setup. Maybe that changed from the pre-series talk about these guys. Maybe this moment is going to call for something different. So it gives your pitcher more time, which allows the pitchers to go deeper into games, which is something for some of these Orioles pitchers we've been screaming about. And even a guy like Bradish had only been getting through like 4 innings. And yeah, I know we had him on somewhat of a pitch count. We didn't want to overextend him. But neither here or there. Overall, like, some of these guys were getting knocked out of the game earlier than we had seen previously in the season. And a part of that, frankly, goes back to the offense not having long, good at-bats. That's something we saw change in that Chicago series. And I believe it was a refocus of the Orioles to let's focus on what produced those results and not just focus on the results, right? Focus on the work and the results will come. Crazy concept, gang, but I believe we're seeing it. We won 8-6 game 1, 6-4 game 2, 5-3 game 3, and 4-1 game 4. You put up a 4, 5, 6, and 8 spot. Doing good things, gang. And that you're starting to see better at-bats. And you're starting to see guys have 6, 8, 10 pitch at-bats. Make these pitchers work to get them out. Not only that, but get them out of rhythm. Make it so that their night's not as easy. Crazy concept. Maybe a little more walks. Maybe a little more walks. Seemed like they've been getting more walks the past few days. Listen, I'm not going to overreact to getting swept in St. Louis, especially when the weather worked against us, because I swear we win one of those two, if not both of those back-to-end games, if not for weather delays. We win at least one, if not two, gang. So I'm not going to go crazy with that, but that ended up being the product of a month worth of maybe poor at-bats or not nearly as good of at-bats as we had been having and can easily have if we just have a little more patience. In game 1 of the Red Sox series, coming off of that 4-game sweep where we asserted our dominance and just overall was the better team. Like, that was the thing about the White Sox series is at the end of the day, watching those games, you just went, the Orioles are a much better team than these White Sox. Even when we were behind, I believe it was Saturday, we were behind 3-0 early. And then the Orioles had that inning in the 8th, I believe, where they had a 2-run shot by O'Hearn, 2-run shot by Santander, solo shot by Westberg. And then they got a 5-3 lead that they ended up winning the game on. Like, even in that game, we were just the better team. You always felt like down 3-0, we were going to come back and win that game. In fact, I even have the proof if you doubt me, because you know I bet the Orioles going into that game. And then down 3-0, I bet them again at plus 400. Ended up cashing big on the Orioles that night. So, financially, it was great for me. But it was better to see, again, I will happily lose money if somehow the Orioles win off of me losing money. Like the night I had them laying 1.5 and we just couldn't close out, I believe, Washington. Other than that one-run victory, we had 2-run lead, blew it, got a 2-run lead, blew it, got a 2-run lead, ended up winning by 1. And I lost money, but the Orioles won, and I was happy with that. Overall, we just asserted our dominance on a team that was much worse. And they caught us at a time where we were really pissed off. And we were really focused. And the Orioles knew they had to go in and win at least 3 of those 4 games. There was no chance that you could split that series to Chicago. Even less of a chance that you could come away with only 1, if not 0 wins, get swept again. No chance that they were getting swept again. You had to win at least 3 of those 4. You did. And they won all 4, which is a beautiful thing. Excuse me, these allergies are making my throat so scratchy nowadays. The pollen is out of control, gang. So that takes us into yesterday's Memorial Day day game against Boston, game 1 of the 3-game set. We haven't lost to Boston yet. Still haven't after yesterday. 11-3 dominating win against Boston. And you have to love it. We play the AL East so tough that I'm not surprised. Boston certainly isn't the best team besides us in the AL East. There's a chance they're the worst team in the AL East. So I'm not surprised that we dominate Boston, but really it's something I've talked about all season, is that we play the AL East very tough. When everyone's talking about you versus the Yankees, if it comes down to that, I think I play the AL East better than the Yankees do. And overall, I think that, if nothing more, will be what propels the Orioles above the Yankees when it's all said and done. I believe now it's sitting at a 1.5 games back from the Yankees. Again, after St. Louis, we were 4 back. It had gone up to 4. And don't think for a second that I wasn't sitting there coming off of that sweep, putting more money on these Orioles. AL, World Series, best record in baseball. Because I was. Truly, I was. Call me a degenerate. I don't care. I was. So in that 7-game span, the Orioles end up going 5-2. 5-game win streak they're on right now, coming out of Chicago, 4-game sweep, and game 1 against Boston at home. Now, pretty good. Pretty good. If on our last episode you would have told me that we were getting swept by the Cardinals after that episode, we were going to lose that next 2 in St. Louis, and then it would be a week from our last episode to this new one, and those were the only games that we lost. We went 5-2 in that span. I'd take it, gang. Sometimes it doesn't matter really where the losses occur. It's as long as you keep the right win-loss percentage in the long run, okay? So this is what I mean by big picture thinking, okay? Because if after last episode you had told me, oh, let's go 5-2, I would have gone, awesome, right? That's perfect. I'm more than happy with that. Now, if you told me that we were going to get swept, I wouldn't have been thrilled. But again, if you're going to tell me, okay, you get swept, but then you win 5 straight after that, awesome. And frankly, if you go back to the Orioles from 2 years ago, who got swept the last time, 106 series ago at that point, they, I believe, went on to win 8 straight games out of that. And this is a better Orioles team. So we're already at 5. Do I think it's going to get to 8? Probably not. Because that means that we take 6 and 7 against Boston and then go right into Tampa and take the first one at least to get to 8. Listen, it probably doesn't happen, but we don't need it to. Again, that's thinking very micro. You got to sometimes look at the schedule as a macro and the record as macro. It all adds up. A bunch of little steps add up to something big. Just get your wins over a big stretch, big span. Again, first 36. If you go 24-12 in the first 36, you're setting yourself up for major success. And they did that. So now you take let's say the next 36 or whatever, and you go, maybe we don't need to go 24-12. Maybe we can go 20-16. And then you add all of that up to the 24-12, and you're like, oh, we extended even more. And it's little steps, and you're breaking the schedule down, gang. And that's something we'll do later on in this episode, probably to close out the episode, in fact. But because it does get tough. It is about to get very, very tough for the Orioles, schedule-wise. But you just have a confidence in this team. And seeing what we saw the last 7 games coming off of that sweep to then get a 4-game sweep to then go back home and beat Boston in that first game, big time, it gives you a lot of hope and promise and just confirms your beliefs in this team. Confirms my beliefs in this team. That when it's all said and done, they're the best team in the American League and potentially the best team in baseball. And I'm still sitting here, all my soapbox screaming it, right? I believe it. The Orioles are a better team than every other American League team. And that's why I have confidence that even when we talk about kind of the murderer's row of schedule they have to come, I still feel confident. I'm still okay. And guess what? Maybe there's another sweep in there. It's possible. I mean, like, maybe we get swept by somebody in there. It's possible. But it's also possible that we do some sweeping. Because we play the AL East very tough. And we play good teams very tough. And we play bad teams very tough. Again, even in the series where we get swept, I could make the argument we probably would have won at least one, if not 2 of those 3 games, had the back 2 games not had rain delays. Sometimes it's just that simple, gang. You want to talk timing in life? Well, that was crap timing. But maybe it was the best timing, and that's what we're going to get to now, is how to react off of this sweepless streak. Well, first off, let me just get it out of the way. It happens to everybody. Even the best teams in baseball get swept. Remember, last season, the Orioles were the only team in baseball, American or national, that did not get swept in a series. They are coming off the AL record of 106 series without getting swept. Eventually, you're going to get swept. That's just not going to always continue. No matter how great you are. It happens to the best teams, right? And we set an American League record, 3rd most, I think, series without a sweep in the history of baseball. I mean, we're going back 100 years, give or take, from the last time a team did it. Okay, sometimes you can't get happier than happy, right? Sometimes you just have to, accept things for what they are, and everything comes to an end. It does. There's an end to everything, gang. It had to end eventually. And just like I talked about, when you can make the argument, hey, it happened, we got swept. But I can make the argument that had the rain not happened, games 2 and 3, we don't get swept. Hell, we might even win that series. So I could make that case that, is it really that big of a deal? No. It happens to every team at some point in a season. Pretty much, other than the Orioles last year. But that's the anomaly. That's not the consistent. That's not what you expect. Okay? And maybe it was for the best. Maybe it was the best thing that could happen to the Orioles. Because we talked about the month prior, in May, them not necessarily having the best at-bats. Maybe having good results when it comes to win-loss, but not really having as good of results as far as hits, extra base hits, home runs scored. Important metrics. They got that record mostly off of pitching last month. So it was a bit of a wake-up call to this offense to be like, hey, I know how talented we are. I know we have Gunnar running potentially away with an MVP season. I know we have Adley, who's probably in the MVP talk as well. But ultimately, gang, we need to do better. We need better results. We need better at-bats. These are not things that we can just keep doing and think that we can get away with. Or else we're going to start getting swept. More than just this one time. More than a second time. This may become the norm. And you don't want getting swept to become the new norm. So, it was a wake-up call for the offense, especially. But I think really the team as a whole took it as a wake-up call. Gang, we need to be better. We need to really start running after this championship. We can't just let it all fall into place. We need to go out and take it. So maybe it was the best thing. Maybe we're going to be sitting in October looking back at that sweep in St. Louis and going, after that point, there was no stopping these Orioles. After that point, they focused in and harnessed all of this talent and energy and vibe together again. And they never looked back. I think it's possible, gang. I think it's possible. And seeing how they responded against the White Sox and how they just responded in Game 1 against the Red Sox, I don't see how that's not more probable than the other way. That the Orioles just kind of brushed it aside and didn't think twice about getting swept. I think they all thought about it. I think they all had a lot of sleepless nights after that. Even during the White Sox series, because again, they almost blew a couple of those leads. They almost didn't come back on Saturday. I think that they've had some sleepless nights trying to really figure out how to be the best player and team they can be. And again, not in a tight way. Sure, maybe when you're wide awake, not being able to sleep, that gets you a little tight. But by the time you wake up the next day, you've gotten the answers. You've thought it through. You've let it breathe. And you're loose again. But with a better plan. With a more better approach to hitting. And really everything in general. And I think it was a great thing in the long run for the Orioles to get swept in St. Louis. To not have to deal with the sweepless streak talk again. Would it have been cool to be the best ever? Yeah, it would have been awesome to set that record. But overall, we don't want to set the record and then get swept again in the playoffs. Or have the talk again just be about, oh, well, yeah, but you got swept in the playoffs. Let's put all of that back. Let's put all of that away. And now, with the sweepless streak to the side and all of that, we can now get to fully enjoy this season. We don't have to look back on last year and have this like string attached to last year. Keep pulling these Orioles thoughts and mindset and just living in the past. We're on to the future and the present. So that's a big thing for these Orioles is mentality-wise, I think it took them to that next level. Being able to cut those ties with last year. Not have to answer questions, not have to see posts or talk or anything about this streak. Do it again and we'll talk about it in another 2 years. Until then, gang, we can put that stuff in the past and focus on winning an AL pennant and a World Series, which is ultimately the goal. The goal isn't don't get swept ever. It's to win a World Series. To win a World Series, you need to win a pennant. And yes, in order to win the pennant, you probably can't be a team that gets swept very often. But you can be a team that got swept here and there. That doesn't disqualify you, gang. And overall, it's a long, long baseball season. That's one of the reasons I said I needed this week to take a step back, because ultimately, it's such a long season, 162 games. There's nothing like it in sports, gang. Football, you get 17 games. Everything you have to overreact to. Hockey, basketball, 82. Yeah, you can overreact to a bad stretch. Baseball's different. Baseball, when you have this good and talented of a team, you need to have trust that it'll start coming around. And it's okay to be very successful, one of the best teams in baseball, and have a tough, really, 3 days? Let's call it a tough week, even though that week you win 5 of 8 games. Like, let's talk. Like, it's okay to take a step back, take a breather, understand that it could be a positive to lose that sweepless streak, to get swept. Can be a positive. Heck, we talked about how last year getting swept in the postseason like they did could be the best thing for this core moving forward in this year and the years to come. And I'm hoping that that's the case. At this point, that's what I have to hope. Because otherwise, this is just going to become a trend. They're just going to be a team that is great in the regular season and then can't do it in the postseason. And that's what they get labeled as. And maybe eventually after 6-10 years, they win that ring. And okay, now we don't have to label them that way, but they still basically are. Yeah, they got their one, but they're still a team that can't get it done when it matters. I think the embarrassment of getting swept out of the ALDS last year is enough to give these guys that taste of failure and propel them to never have that feeling again, or rarely have that feeling again. It's the type of thing that when they get to the playoffs this year will be a benefit. And that's what I have to think about. That's what I have to rely on. But it's truly how I feel. It's not just how I want to feel about it. It's truly how I feel about it because of the guys they have that are experiencing it. Adley, Gunnar, Westberg. These are guys that I think are going to take that and run with it. Grayrod, Bradish. These are guys that are going to take that and run with it. That's what I believe. That's what I think. So maybe it was a good wake-up call for these Orioles. They seem to have responded well with 5 straight wins after that sweep. So good on them. Now, the next bit of news is, since our last episode, we've seen John Means and then Dean Kremer head to the IL. Now, they're for different injuries. They kind of are giving off different vibes as far as what I've heard so far about it. And again, I don't have inside information, and I don't really know any more than anybody else, gang. And the Orioles, you know, are very tight to the vest with every piece of information possible. So I don't know if there's real word on it around with anybody. Certainly I don't have it. But we talked earlier in spring training about how we felt about what the Orioles were saying, right? Let's equate it to the Yankees with Garrett Cole, okay? Because that's a conversation we had in spring, I believe, is when Cole got hurt. Maybe Cole, I don't think Cole started the season. Again, I'm not a Yankees podcaster. I know our guys were on the IL in spring, and I want to think Garrett Cole was too, okay? But let's just talk about it. Apples to apples. When the Orioles announced Kyle Bradish especially, but also John Means, would not start spring training on time, and especially that Bradish had this injury, you know, you got a little worried. But all the news we heard was they'll be back very soon. They're maybe going to miss a month. They're going to be back, and we had great feeling about it, and the Orioles kept you up to date with that and gave you the good feeling that they would be back, and they were. Clearly, they were. Whereas Garrett Cole, you kind of didn't really get any of this positivity from the Yankees. They kind of were like, oh, we'll look at it in 4 to 6 weeks. We'll make a judgment call in 4 to 6 weeks. We'll figure it out then. Whereas the Orioles were like, we've made the judgment call. They just need 4 or 6 weeks to kind of ramp up and take it slow and get back into it. But they're going to be there. And both of them got back pretty quickly. About a month into the year. It was impressive, especially Bradish, how quick they pushed him forward. Now, Garrett Cole, still not back. I haven't really heard much word about when he is coming back. Somebody told me the other day, July. That's what I just heard. But again, very secretive, not a lot of positive talk on that end. So again, that's for the Yankees podcast. But I'm just making the point that you can kind of gauge the vibe off of what you're being told about it. And this is where I think John Means and Dean Kremer split. Because I'm just going to be frank, I don't have a good feeling on John Means. I think the man probably needs Tommy John again. It's a left forearm injury. I see it being more of an injury than a precautionary move. Put it that way. And whether he needs Tommy John or maybe they can platelet-rich injection it and he can pull the Kyle Bradish and actually get back and all that. I don't have a good vibe on it. From the second I heard it and saw it, it just has this ominous tone. Now, maybe it's because we haven't really seen John Means in 2 years and he got Tommy John before and missed that whole season and then missed basically all of last season with it too and then came back and then arm fatigue or whatever it was pushed him out of the playoffs. And it was just one of these vibes where, again, coming into the year, if you listen to every single episode, you will know I've talked that I didn't expect to get much out of John Means this year. Whether he just wasn't the pitcher he used to be or if he couldn't stay healthy. Well, it looks like that's the case, that he couldn't stay healthy, which is a shame because it kind of was looking like he was going to be the pitcher he used to be. Frankly, I believe on our last episode, maybe 2 episodes ago, I talked the stupid idea of wanting to bet that there was going to be a no-hitter every single one of John Means' starts. I think he had one since then. And he didn't throw a no-hitter or close to it, and I think he got taken out of the game for injury. And now he might be gone. So do away with that idea, obviously. Heck, after the other day, I might be looking to do that for Kyle Bradish moving forward. But that's for later on in the episode. I don't have a good feeling with John Means. Again, I have no inside information. I just feel like this is an ominous injury. Whereas Dean Kremer has a right tricep strain. I'm actually feeling okay about it. Again, I don't have a ton of information on it. I want to think that I've seen the vibe that was more precautionary than anything. I have the feeling Dean Kremer will be back. But maybe it'll take a month or two, unfortunately. I mean, let's call it what it is. Apples to apples again. Tyler Wells, who got hurt towards the beginning of the season, who I love. I'm the president of his fan club. Maybe he forgot that since he's been on the IL because just hasn't been much news to talk about for Tyler Wells because they moved him for something that was deemed more precautionary. And I feel like I haven't gotten an update on him in at least a month. It almost seems like Tyler Wells is missing. From my vantage point. Not the Orioles, I don't think, view that. I think he's down in Sarasota. I think he's just working in extended spring training, rehab type of John. But overall, I don't know. I can't guarantee that Dean Kremer will be back sooner rather than later, but I have a much better feeling that his is not an issue moving forward like John Means is. And we might have lost Meansy for the season, which sucks because truly he had become that 4th stud in the rotation. Ultimately, though, And we'll get to really what happens with the rotation, but Cole Irvin winds up jumping back into the rotation, which is something that was probably going to happen anyway, we talked about, with the 6-man rotation coming. Now, you question, can they even do this 6-man rotation? Who's even the 5-man rotation? Those are questions we'll get to in a second. Overall, I want to talk first about two guys that were on the roster at times this season, got designated for assignment, and unfortunately we lost from the organization. Ryan McKenna, who went to the Giants, and Big Mike Baumann, who I believe went to Milwaukee, maybe? I can't remember where Baumann went, or maybe I did. I don't know. I think it was Milwaukee. Neither here or there. McKenna and Baumann no more on the roster, and that sucks. You know, they were both guys that I was advocating for to make this club out of camp because they didn't have any options left, and I didn't want to lose them. McKenna didn't make the club out of camp, got through waivers, and then when they brought him up, I guess had to clear waivers again. I actually didn't think that was the case. I thought once we moved him once through waivers, we didn't have to do it again, but I guess clearly I was wrong, or maybe the Orioles just chose to take this time to move him somewhere else and get value for him because they didn't see really the path to him getting back in the majors, which kind of surprises me because you could have him sitting on the bench just like Kyle Stowers is sitting on the bench. It would give you that extra right-handed bat, which helps with the outfield alignments especially. And you know, he came up and performed pretty well this season in a short stint. Had 2 home runs, I believe. Like, wasn't overmatched or anything. So, again, I like Ryan McKenna. I like Mike Baumann. Mike Baumann was having a tough season. So, the writing was on the wall for Baumann that he at least was going to get dropped to the minors. And whether he got picked up or traded or whatever in that process, there was a good likelihood. I mean, Baumann has a lot to like about him, but he just didn't come into this season having success. And it wasn't necessarily unlucky success. It looked like, I don't know, he just didn't have the movement and control on his pitches to be successful to where the Orioles needed him to be. And he had some issues keeping the ball in the ballpark and just letting up hits in general. So Baumann and McKenna are no more on this roster. Certainly, they were names that we talked in spring training a decent amount about. And in the season, at times, we talked their names. Unfortunately, no longer with us. We wish them well because I like both of them as players. I like both of them as kind of prospects, like a little past prospects, but still have a little juice of prospectness in them, if you will. Okay. So, let's get back to the rotation. And what do we do after the first 3, okay? We know that we have Burns, Bradish, and Greyrod. Lock, stock, barrel, top 3. And we'll talk about just how special the 3 of them are. Excuse me. But what do we do after this? Well, like we mentioned, Cole Irvin finds himself now back in the rotation, and that's a good thing. Cole Irvin's had great success for us in the rotation and was willing to move to the bullpen, do whatever the club needed. And we love that attitude, and he had success out of the bullpen too. Frankly, though, he's been very successful as a starter. Had that stretch of 22 1/3 innings scoreless, little bit right before they moved him to the bullpen, in fact. So, again, it wasn't even performance that pushed him to the pen. It was really just available spots. Well, now you get a couple spots back available. And Cole Irvin, welcome back to the rotation. So, that gives you 4. Well, where do we go after that? Well, Suarez had the spot start. That kind of makes him the 5th starter, but I have the vibe that he would do this team better overall from the bullpen. Okay, we've seen him have success as a starter for us, and then we saw him go to the bullpen and have even more success for us. I just think he has that feel of a lockdown reliever. He really has great movement on his stuff too, and he can be a long guy for you, give you a couple innings. He could be a closer for you. That's a name that I swear has a real chance to be the closer for these Orioles at the end of the season when it's all said and done. And frankly, I almost prefer that at least attempt over Kimbrel at this point. Because while this segment isn't about Kimbrel, the thing about Kimbrel to me is that it's going to be fine and usually work in the regular season, but it does not have the feelings of something that's going to work come postseason. And I'm worried that the Orioles may get themselves in a spot where they go, hey, this is really working. Let's see if this works in the postseason, and I don't think it will. So, again, Albert Suarez could be that guy to take that role. So could Tyler Wells, who also is another guy that, again, I haven't really heard much about in his rehab process. His extended spring, I'm not sure if there is any timetable and what that may be on Tyler Wells. Overall, though, he's a guy that could absolutely come back and jump in this rotation. Because remember, he won a rotation spot out of camp. He did. Like, he beat out Cole Irvin for that rotation spot out of camp. Okay. Well, I guess technically not. Okay, so he was, now that my mind clicks back, that was when you had Burns and Grayrod as the top two, and then you had Wells, Irvin, and Kremer. But if you go back and remember, Wells was the number 3 starter then coming into this season. So there's still a lot to like for me about Tyler Wells. I love the guy. I really hope he's close to getting back. And if so, he's a man that makes perfect sense to jump right in that rotation spot. But remember, we have been talking about the potential for a 6-man rotation in this gauntlet of a schedule. And we'll talk about why that makes sense again when we get to the schedule. But overall, the Orioles could still look to do that. So, okay, then maybe you have Irvin, Suarez, and Wells. Well, Wells has to get back healthy, which is no guarantee because this is the point. We basically are going to need the 6-man rotation. He has to be a week out if it's going to help us in this process, a week or so out. So then where do we go, gang? Where do we go? I think the name that I have landed on, and frankly, I came to this on my own conclusion, and just in the last day or so have been seeing more and more articles posting about this concept and this thought and idea, and I think it's great, is Cade Povich. It's time for Cade Povich to get the call to the major leagues. Listen, the Orioles are not risk adverse to making the call for a minor leaguer, whether it be in the past or just look at this season. Whereas Cowser made the team, eventually Holiday got called up, Holiday got moved down, Heston got moved up, Heston got moved down, Stowers got called up, is up there now. So they're not hesitant to make this move. Povich has been in the system for a couple years now and has really vaulted himself to that top starting pitching prospect for these Orioles. And really coming out of camp, remember he had a phenomenal spring training, absolutely phenomenal spring training, where he really pushed for a roster spot. And again, the only reason he didn't is because the spots weren't there to give. Well, now the spots might be there to give. And he's had a great run so far this year in the minor leagues. In 9 starts, Povich is 5-1 with an ERA of 2.08, a whip of just over 1.06, I believe, a strikeout to walk ratio of 65-17. He hasn't allowed more than 3 earned runs in any of his starts this season. He's had a minimum of 5 strikeouts, as high as at least 9, 10, maybe even 11 in every start, but minimum 5 Ks in every start, and a maximum of 4 walks. He's done it twice in those 9 starts. Okay, so only twice has he given up 4 walks. Never more than that this season. It's impressive stuff from Povich, who, again, last month was coming off of International Pitcher of the Month in April, excuse me. I'm not sure where he ranks as far as May goes, but based off of the numbers that I've seen, there's no way that he's completely in the opposite ballpark. You know what I mean? He's at least slightly in the running, or at least up there in the honorable mentions because of how great of a season he's had. And I think this is the time, gang. This is the time that you can bring Cade Povich up, and even if he has success, still move him down eventually. If we get Wells and Kremer back in, let's say, a month, and Povich has pitched pretty well in that month. Let's say in that month he's had 5 starts, okay? And let's say in those 5 starts he's gone 2-1 with an ERA of 4 and a 2-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio. I'd be like, that's successful. That's good. And that's still, we can put you down. We can send you back down. And, retool a couple things that you learned in the majors you need to improve on. And then next time you're back, come at the end of the year or next season, you're elite. You're looking like another Gray Rod, another Bradish, another Burns. And these Orioles have this unbelievable young starting pitching core to move forward with. Either way, that's the case, because I think Cade Povich is in that camp. But you just have to think, this is the time, man. Coming out of camp, I believe he would have made the team out of camp if this was a year or two ago. But this year, the spot wasn't open. Well, now the spot's open, especially because after this Boston series, you have 17 straight games, followed by 13 straight games after a single day off. So you have 30 games in 31 days coming up after this Boston series and a single day off. You're going to be using probably a 6-man rotation at some point. Bring Cade Povich in. That way, you don't even have to grind him in that. You can just have him normal. Again, maybe Burns keeps his normal routine and everyone else kind of filters in. Maybe Bradish and Gray Rod also keep it. And then we kind of run this thing towards the bottom where when it gets to this point, we run 2, then it gets here, and now we can run another guy and keep everybody just in locks, just normal rhythm. But I think a 6-man rotation, as long as the arms are there, that we feel confident in, I think it's coming. So again, even if you want to say, well, let's just put Suarez and Irvin back in the rotation. Okay, well, there's 5. So who would be the 6th? If we need that spot start, if we need that, who is it going to be? I think Cade Povich's name makes the most sense to take one of those rotation spots. And then when you need the spot start, have it be Suarez, who can live in the pen, and then come in for a spot start here and there during that run and help you out along the way. That, to me, makes the most sense. And I think Povich is ready to at least be challenged and at least be given the opportunity to try and be a successful major league pitcher. So look for Cade Povich, frankly, I think in the next week. Now, if you look at who's starting what games, I want to say that game 3 against Boston doesn't have a starter named yet. I don't know about rest days for Cade Povich lining up with that. But if it does, if that lines up for a normal start day for Cade Povich, don't be surprised that if literally tomorrow the Orioles have Cade Povich starting on the mound. It's possible, gang. Certainly possible. All right. So, gotta highlight one huge thing. I said it over the series and the games that we had previously missed. We weren't going to focus in and harness in on one individual performance, but we will for one individual performance. And that's Kyle Bradish. We talked a little early about how he's, maybe had some trouble getting deeper into games since he's come back. The Orioles had him on pitching limits, maybe only throwing 70, 80 pitches in the game, getting through 4, maybe 5 innings. We saw the real Kyle Bradish show up. Okay? And as he tossed 7 no-hit innings against the White Sox, was taken out not given the chance. Listen, he was over 100 pitches. Again, this is a team that just had some pitch restrictions on the man. We're not going to have him try and throw 130 against so he can no-hit the freaking White Sox. Okay, you're just not going to do it. But amazing to see. I believe that was Sunday's game, and he looked phenomenal. He really looks back to his Cy Young caliber form of last year, but even to another level, because now he's got that two-seamer really working. He still has the off-speed and breaking ball stuff, but now the two-seamer allows him to maybe live a little more fastball heavy than he was last season. Because remember, if you look at the lineage of Kyle Bradish, and we've talked about this, 2 years ago he was very four-seamer heavy and got hit around a ton on that four-seamer. Last year they turned him into more of a reverse split pitcher, where he would pitch off of his breaking balls and then throw the fastball off of the breaking ball changeup. Whereas this year, now he can kind of get more back to fastball heavy, but relying on the two-seamer that now has been looking elite. And also relying on then the off-speed and breaking ball stuff, which is also elite. And now Kyle Bradish is really seems to coming into his own. I love it. I absolutely love it. Listen, to start the spring training off the Kyle Bradish injury news was one of the least fun moments for these Orioles in the last few years. And to see that fast forward, basically going into June, and Kyle Bradish is pitching even better than he was last year, and having 7 no-hit innings even against the stupid White Sox team. I mean, it's beyond phenomenal stuff. It's beautiful. And it's even more beautiful when you look at the elite starting pitching trio that now we have in Burns, Bradish, and Grayrod. Because when you're in a playoff series, you need really 3 stud starters. You can get away with your fourth one kind of being iffy. If he has to start, he might not start in like the DS, maybe the CS and World Series. He has to get a start in it, maybe 2. And yeah, you don't want him to be a liability, but if you have 3 dominant starting pitchers at the top of your rotation like we do right now, it's unbelievable. It is unfreaking believable. And frankly, I don't know if I've ever seen a trio of starting pitchers on the Orioles like as dominant as these 3 in my lifetime. What? Messina, Erickson, and Key? Like, no. I mean, certainly not the Chris Tillman, Eduardo Rodriguez. I don't even think I think he was gone. No. I mean, he was there for part of it. We traded for Andrew Miller during it, so, like, you can't even really count that. Like, those definitely, if Chris Tillman is your ace like he was on those teams, like, I'm sorry, but that's not it. Gossman before he was Gossman, Bundy back and forth, probably injured at the time, like, and certainly not living up to what we thought Dylan Bundy would be. It's just a beautiful thing, gang. And it's one of those things that you see now, and you're like, God, if these 3 can stay healthy, these are the 3 that are going to lead us to the World Series. Again, just look at what happened last month, where our offense maybe wasn't performing as great, scoring just over 3 runs a game and winning games, but not great. Not getting the base runners we need, maybe getting squeezed by umps, things that could happen in the postseason. And your starting pitchers come in and dominate these games and keep your team in it. It allows you to find a way to win that game 3-1, 3-2. It's exciting. It's beyond exciting to have these 3 elite starting pitching trio, possibly the top 3 starting, or the top starting pitching trio of any team in baseball. Again, we've had this conversation before. You want to say Phillies, you want to say Dodgers. Okay, maybe you have another team or 2 in your arsenal that you think can compete with these starters. Okay, fine. I mean, this is an easy top 5 starting pitching trio in baseball. Almost definitely a top top 3, again, if you want to say Phillies or Dodgers to me, okay, maybe I can bite. But maybe not. And then, potentially the top starting pitching trio in all of baseball. Now, another thing that I think woke up for this Orioles offense after that sweep was the idea of running the bases more. Stealing bases. This is something coming into the year, like the first week or two, I feel like they were steal, take this extra base. Oh, and this guy's not paying attention. We're going to take the base in a crazy moment. Like, we're going to do all this running. And then it kind of was like, screw that. Let's just keep our guys on first or second and hit home runs. Well, then when the home runs aren't coming as quick, your offense starts to get stymied. You start leaving too many men on base. You start not scoring runs. You start not grinding out runs, and that's a problem. And I think the Orioles woke up for a little and said, hey, we have Gunnar Henderson. We have Jorge Mateo. We have Cedric Mullins. We have all of these guys with speed. Pretty much every single player, if you put them at their position, has average to plus speed, if not elite speed, from some of them for that position. Even Mountcastle and Ahern, if you compare them to other first basemen, have at least above average speed. I mean, Mateo at second has elite speed. Gunnar has elite speed. Westberg, for a third baseman and even second baseman, above average speed. Adley, for a catcher, above average speed. Cowser, for a big corner outfielder, above average speed. Cedric, possibly elite speed, at least above average speed. Hayes, at least above average speed. Definitely not elite, but at least slightly above average. So Santander and McKenna are like the two guys that can't run. Maybe Urias. Other than that, we got guys with wheels. So let's put some guys in motion. Let's take advantage of these new rules. And frankly, the Orioles are one of the best teams when it comes to stolen base percentage. So it's kind of shocking to me that they went away from it. So they started off amazing. I think they were like 10 for their first 10 or 11 for their first 11 or who knows how good to start the year. And then, yeah, they got caught stealing a few times. And then it seemed like they kind of stopped. And now they're stealing again, and they're stealing almost every bag they swipe. So, again, this is just one of those things that I felt was important for this team coming into the year, was just the speed. And because speed is dangerous, and speed makes teams worried, and makes pitchers not concentrate on the batter, and either can't hit the strike zone, or lobs in some meatballs because he's just not thinking about what he needs to do to deliver this pitch properly. Not only that, but then you get some guys in different positions. You get out of the double plays. You maybe even bring in a run or two on a ground ball that wouldn't have created that, or even a pop fly like we saw the other day. I believe it was in the Boston game, but a pop fly, Mateo was on third, and it was to shallow center. And the Red Sox center fielder, he didn't necessarily come up on the ball properly. Certainly looked like as he was transferring the ball, he had to do somewhat of an extra, like he slipped a little. He had to do a little extra thing. And then he didn't make a great throw. But just the idea of running in those situations, getting to the point where you have the man in that situation is big. And then you can drive them home, get more men in scoring position, take advantage of your speed. And I think the Orioles are going to continue to do that moving forward. I think they hit a point where they realized they were being too stagnant on the base paths for the athleticism that they have on the club. And they need to take advantage of their wheels a little bit more, and the wheels have to keep turning. All right, so next, speaking of wheels turning, is Jorge Mateo just taking second, man. And not necessarily I'm talking as a steal. I'm talking about as a position. Taking second base as his own. And I got some great Jorge Mateo stats. And people want to be shocked that maybe he's reaching this next level. Even if it's not elite, this next level of game that he's showing and consistency maybe he's showing. And I'm not that surprised. Again, this is a guy that I talked up, even if he was just a substitute fielder and pinch runner once it came playoffs, I felt like had real value for the Orioles. Now, you add in the fact that he's having good stats. It's exciting. And don't forget, he's just 28 years old. That's pretty much average baseball player reaching their prime age. So the idea that Jorge Mateo could really reach a prime in this next couple years is beyond exciting. And he's really just taken second base for his. He saw the opening. He was okay being the super utility guy, moving back and forth. But they saw the opening at second, and he took advantage of that opportunity and has made it his for the moment. I'm not saying that come playoffs, he's held on to that second base spot. But for now, it's his. And one of the big stats that I have that shows you just how great he is for this team and how much of an X factor he is for this team. And I think people, when I first was talking that in spring training, would look at me kind of side-eyed and be like, how's this guy going to be one of the biggest X factors to the team? Well, in games that Jorge Mateo has scored a run for the Orioles this season, the Orioles are 15-2. 15-2 in games that Jorge Mateo scores a run. And we're getting that from the bottom of the order when he's playing. Playing an elite defensive second base for a guy who is still really learning the position, but whose speed and athleticism makes up for maybe whatever he doesn't have that other shortstops have, and allows him to make plays almost on a nightly basis that you go, holy cow, wow, that was a hard play he made look easy. And that was a play that could have maybe saved the game. That's a play that keeps men off base. That's a play that gets a pitcher out of a jam. Playing an elite level second base, okay? 15-2 when he scores a run. And, you might be thinking of last year's Jorge Mateo, or most of last year's Jorge Mateo, when you're like, yeah, but he doesn't get on base. How's he going to score a run if he's not on base? This Jorge Mateo gets on base, at least a decent amount. Batting .250 at the moment, a .300 on base percentage, slugging .470, I believe 2 or 3 home runs. It looks as though he has cut down his swing some. He used to have this big, looping swing. I always felt like his bat was so top-heavy that it just... And now it seems like he's almost more Westberg-esque, where he's just straight to that baseball. And it's like a straight line. It's not this curved path. It's just straight to the baseball. And he's got the natural power that he can hit the home runs. He can hit the doubles and triples off the wall. He can have those extra base hits and those gappers by just going straight to the baseball like Westberg. But let me tell you, clearly, him just getting on base and being able to score is one of the keys to the Orioles winning these games. So Jorge Mateo getting on is a big factor. And I think now that he's getting basically everyday reps at second, and he's not worried about maybe playing center or short or wherever else the Orioles, left and right, wherever else the Orioles want to put him. Now he just has to think second base and hitting. Out of nowhere, I think that those could climb. He's done a much better job on 2-strike pitches this year, not chasing those sliders out of the zone, really being more patient. And I think that is one of the ultimate X factors to him taking that next jump and him being a force. And frankly, again, I don't need him to be Gunnar Henderson. I don't need him to be the star. I can deal with him batting .250 with a .300 on base percentage, going 10 for 10 on steals so far. Okay? And playing that elite defense with elite speed on the base paths. I can deal with that for my second baseman and 9-hole hitter, or 8-hole if McKenna is batting 9, let's say. Which, frankly, I think is the wrong way to go about it. I would actually, I understand the reasoning, but I would want Mateo as that kind of leadoff in the 9-hole sort of play. But the Orioles and Brandon Hyde have a lot of maneuvering to always do with this lineup. I could make that same case for Cedric Mullins being that 9-hole leadoff hitter. I could make the case for McKenna being behind all of them and being able to drive in those runs before the top of the order comes up and kind of be able to reset for that top of the order. I could make all those cases, right? And it all depends on who has the days off and who's in what spot. So all of that is interesting to me and is, changes on a daily basis. But Jorge Mateo, man, special. And I always, when it comes to Mateo, want to give a shout out to my boy Joey Dibbs, who was on Jorge Mateo, I swear, 6 to 8 years ago. Whenever he signed his first minor league contract, my boy was on him through all of the different stops coming into Baltimore. I'll never forget when he texted me the day the Orioles got Mateo. And to me, I said, okay, just another, guy, whatever. Some guy to fill out the minor league roster. Joey had a completely different take, and boy, was Joey looking like he was right. Jorge Mateo coming into his own, man, and you have to love to see it. Would I be shocked if, just like last year, it kind of hits a peak and then dips, and he ends up losing his second base spot? No. But for the moment, him doing this is making sure the Orioles don't give Jackson Holliday, don't give Connor Norby, don't give any of these other potential prospects or options a chance at second base because it's just Mateo's. And then on off days for Mateo, maybe they move Westberg to second, have Urias at third. Okay, I can live with that. And now Urias is more of just the utility man. And Mateo's like the starting second baseman. It's very exciting. And frankly, again, every night he's making plays, getting on base, and hitting balls very hard. And he's making plays in the field that make you go, I can't believe he got to that. I can't believe he got to that and then delivered the throw. I can't believe that Jorge Mateo is saving the game defensively time and time and time again, even though I can believe it. And I love Mateo. Very exciting to see where he has come and seeing where he goes moving forward. All right, so we're wrapping this up. Couple more topics left. The first of which is a possible trade for a closer and setup man. Certainly, this is something we have talked in length about throughout multiple episodes. The idea of not only will they do this, but what targets they might look at when they're doing it. Well, I'm at the point where I think they definitely will make a move, okay? Now, The Athletic, though, had this article where I don't pay for The Athletic, so I couldn't read it, but I got the gist off of just the picture, the memo, and kind of a short description of the article, where basically it was trading for Mason Miller, who's my ultimate goal to trade for this season, Mason Miller from the Athletics, okay? I know The Athletic is writing it, and he's playing for the Athletics. I know, confusing. Anyway, the problem with their article, it wasn't just Mason Miller. It seemed like it was for a closer and a setup man, getting 2 bullpen pieces from the A's, which is fine. I'm all for it. Listen, getting Mason Miller would be an enormous X factor for these Orioles, not just this season, but moving forward for the years to come. I think would be tremendous. And I've talked about how we have the prospect pool to absolutely get it done. Well, The Athletic, in their article, had us moving Heston and either Povich or McDermott, one of our 2 starting pitching prospects, top starting pitching prospects, for Mason Miller and another reliever. Again, I don't know who it was. If I looked at the A's roster, I probably could pick out maybe their only other good reliever and be like him. True. I don't think they have many. Anyway, I think that while, yes, the idea of trading for Mason Miller and maybe another guy, awesome, I'm all for it. I don't think it's necessary to give up Heston Kjerstad and one of our 2 top starting pitching prospects. Frankly, I think that it also makes more sense for the Athletics to spread that talent out. Say, instead of going for 2 of your elite prospects, I'd rather go for 4 or 5 of those second-tier prospects. That's what I think would intrigue both teams more. I think it would intrigue the A's more because they would be getting 2 or 3 major leaguers instantly with 2 or 3 more in the pipeline. You're literally rebuilding half, or not half, but a quarter of your roster potentially in a couple years off of this one trade. But from the Orioles standpoint, I think it makes more sense too. We don't want to lose these top prospects. We know we're very hesitant, as we should be, to trade a guy like Heston, who has yet to reach his potential in the majors, but has shown so much potential in the minors, was a number 2 overall pick. Just this kid that we've invested a lot of time and capital in, but also that we think has so much to give. And frankly, also has kind of this spot looming on the team. He doesn't have the spot yet on the team because of a guy like O'Hearn in it, but O'Hearn, Santander, somebody like that. But come next year, that spot should be there, even if O'Hearn's still on the team, which I think he will be. Santander probably won't be, unfortunately. In which case, boom, there's the spot that opens. Like that. So we're already coming close to the point where that spot will be open for Heston. So I don't think it's necessary for the Orioles to bail on him. And if they were, I don't think that that's the trade they would choose to bail on him for. Okay? Same thing with Povich or McDermott. I think the Orioles don't want to give up any of them. But the Orioles' second-tier prospects, in a lot of cases, are other teams' top, or would be other teams' top prospects, right? So there's names that I've mentioned before, the Max Wagners, the Judd Fabians, guys like that fit into this role. A few others, one I've definitely mentioned, Seth Johnson, who's like that third starting pitching prospect. Now that's a name I'd be happy to give up. Not that I don't think he could be successful and very talented, but I'm going to keep my top 2 and then spend a third who will be your top starting pitching prospect. He's just my third starting pitching prospect. So I can give him up. So Seth Johnson, Daniel Johnson, the kind of outfielder, infielder, who's had a great run not only in spring training this year, but in the minors also, and I think is really elevating his stock, not just with the Orioles, but throughout baseball. I think Daniel Johnson is either a guy that's going to be on this team in the next year, or the Orioles are going to trade in the next year. Personally, that's just how I kind of feel, because he's elevating his stock so much, it feels like, in this past year, really like spring and this season. It feels like he's elevating himself. And again, maybe this is just my take, but I really feel he's starting to elevate himself towards kind of that bordering top prospect, in which case other teams could bite if the Orioles don't think that he actually is that elite. And on the flip side, if the Orioles do think he actually is an elite prospect now, that's a guy you can hold on to and find a spot for. He has plenty of versatility, plays the infield, plays the outfield, can play in the middle, can play on the outside, can do a lot of different things for you as a team. Really good speed, good contact, a lot of things you like about a Daniel Johnson. But again, you got to give up something, right? Like the A's aren't just going to give you Mason Miller because they stink. The A's are going to give you Mason Miller because it's in what they believe their best interest moving forward is. So if I give them both Johnsons, Seth and Daniel, and then maybe Kyle Stowers, I think that that's the beginning of a more interesting trade, at least the beginning for the A's, than necessarily just saying, give me Povich, or give me McDermott and give me Heston. Oh yeah, that's awesome for you, but then you're putting all your eggs into these two baskets where otherwise we'll give you 5, we'll give you 6. We'll spread out your wealth. And guess what? We've done a very good job with drafting and scouting. So maybe trust us and our guys somewhat also when we've invested in these guys. And these are the guys we're offering you. A lot to be said. And I think a lot of potential for that trade. Now, frankly, I think this is a name we talked about, I think, on the last time we talked on who these trade targets were going to be. And obviously, Mason Miller is the guy that I want more than anyone. But Helsley from St. Louis really looked good and impressed me. And he was a name I brought up, not too long ago, a week or two ago. And literally before we even saw him, I brought him up as one of the potential targets for the Orioles to do. And he'll cost you a lot less because the Cardinals also aren't going anywhere, just like the A's. Helsley has one more year of control after this. He's older, I believe 28, whereas Mason, I think, is 25, 26. So it's just one of these things. Mason's under control for 5-6 years. Helsley only has one more year left after this. I believe that, and he's having a great season. He's looking great. He's the type of guy that a contender wants to go out and grab. He, to me, has the guy that written all over him that we could go out and get for maybe just one of these names. Maybe even less than one of these names. Right? Maybe even farther down the prospect sheet, picking somewhere in the third tier. We can give one or two of those guys to the Cardinals for Helsley. I don't know. Time will tell, but I really think the Orioles are going to have wheels in motion for this earlier rather than later. At some point in the next month, I could see this trade happening. Certainly, they have 2 months until it needs to happen. But ultimately, I think it'll be about that first month, maybe right before or right after All-Star break, which again then pushes you closer to that 2-month stage if it's after All-Star break, because the trade deadline is pretty much after the All-Star break. Time will tell. I just disagree overall with the Athletics saying that the deal would take one of our best, maybe our best, but certainly one of our best elite positional prospects in Heston and one of the top 2 starting pitching prospects that we have. And don't forget, the MLB draft is like a month or so away. So that you're just going to add talent. So that's why I think making the trade beforehand is great, because then you can make the trade and then just instantly know what you need to retool, or not even worry about that in the draft. And frankly, a guy, there are a couple guys who might not have a spot on this team come next year, but are performing great for us this year. A guy like Cole Irvin. Cole Irvin has had a great year, and Orioles still, I think, have a year, if not 2 years, of control on him. But I don't know where the spot is necessarily for Cole Irvin moving forward after this season. So maybe you wind up flipping Cole Irvin in the offseason. And these are all things the Orioles are thinking about and talking about, I believe, constantly. But let's play ultimate chess, right? Where if you're going to trade Cole Irvin, and we believe Cole Irvin stays successful, so he's going to have a market, and we're going to be able to bring in this kind of level caliber player for him, or these 2 level caliber players. Well, then if we take the same 2 level caliber players and trade them for Mason Miller, what do we really then give up? The other 2 or 3 players that we're not getting back in a trade? Okay, well, maybe we replace them through the draft. Maybe we replace them through other trades, because certainly there are other guys who could be moved. Sure, Santander's a free agent after this year, so if we don't trade him this year, he's gone, I assume, or he's back, but either way, we're not going to trade him for anything. But a guys like Hayes, a guys like Mullins, they might all be on the block come after this year, and they still have control left. So it all comes down to thinking that far ahead, and what are you going to be able to get for these certain guys if you move them? And that makes trading some of these guys easier this season for somebody that's going to help you win this season. Just a thought. All right. So we're running a little long, but, it's been a week. I love talking Orioles baseball, as you know. I've been missing it. Every single day I don't do these episodes, gang. I plan on doing an episode. I'm talking through the episode all day long in my head, whether I wind up doing it or not. That's the irony, is that, like, for this week that I've been off or not done an episode, really, it's funny because I've basically done an episode every single day in my own head, but then had to change the episode the next day because another game happened. So now I have more to compact and more and compact and more compact. And before you know it now, we have this block of a week. But I think it's been a great episode so far. And we're going to end it on just a short little look ahead to what the Orioles have in front of them. It's something we've talked a few times before, but now it's essentially here, right? So we have this Boston series, 2 more games left of that. Then the Orioles have an off day. And then we start what I believe is by far the hardest stretch of schedule for the Orioles this season. You get 17 straight games without an off day after our next off day, after the Boston series, right? So after that Boston series, you have an off day. Excuse me for being a little confusing. This does happen in my brain. So Boston series, you have an off day. Then you come back and play 17 straight games against Tampa Bay at home, Toronto and Tampa Bay again, both on the road. Come back home, which is a blessing, but you then have to face Atlanta, who, yes, just lost Acuna, but is certainly no slouch, and Philly, who's the best team in baseball. Okay, so that's the 17 straight games, 5 series, 17 straight games. You have 1 day off, then you have to come back, go to New York to face the Yankees, to Houston to face the Astros, back home against Cleveland, who's been very solid, and then Texas, who we know last time we saw swept us out of the postseason, for 13 straight games. So you have 30 games in 31 days after this Red Sox series. And gang, that's why we've talked about getting off to such a good start. That's why we talked about the need for potentially a 6-man rotation in the weeks to come. That's why we've talked about how important it was to really get off to that great start and have the wake-up call before you're in the midst of that. Have the wake-up call when you're leaving St. Louis and you get to go to Chicago to play the White Sox at 4 and then go home to play the Red Sox. And again, we play the AL East very tough. So this Red Sox series I feel great about, especially up 1 game already on the series. The 3-game set against Tampa at home, I feel great about. We played Tampa very tough, and Tampa's not as good as they were last season when we also played them very tough. Still a tough team, though. Then you get 4 in Toronto, but again, Toronto's, even though they've been maybe a little better in recent weeks, still is not living up to the hype. They feel like losers. And, knock on wood, I don't want to wake up the beast. But ultimately, I feel as good against any of these AL East teams. So Boston, Tampa, Toronto, Tampa again. That gets you through at least a part of that stint. It gets you through the first third of those 9 very tough series, okay? Then, yes, you get Atlanta, Philly. Very, very tough. But at least you're getting them at home. By the way, I should be at the first Phillies game that series in Baltimore. And then you get New York, who, again, we play the division tough, and we already have won 3 of the first 4 games against the Yankees. Houston, boom, feeling good. Then you got, so Houston, you're feeling good, but, still a tough team. They might not be the best, but still a tough team. Then you got Cleveland, who, again, has been playing very good baseball, has a better record than we do at the moment, I believe. And then Texas, who, again, maybe not playing their best baseball, but just like Houston, a very dangerous team and a team that had our number all of last season. Regular season, postseason, they had our number. So it's not an easy stretch, gang. Still, the Orioles continue to put up great numbers. And I think that wake-up call really was a blessing going into this stretch. And that's going to take you through June, gang. After that, the schedule opens up. We literally only have 2, long stretches without an off day again in the whole season, both of which are 13 games in a row. And that's twice. And that's both right after the All-Star break, but with some break in between. So some off days. So very exciting stuff, gang. Very exciting stuff. And yeah, just happy to be back talking Orioles baseball, gang. We had about a week off. We will not have a week off in between this one and the next one. I'm hoping to pump it out tomorrow or maybe Thursday. But just be excited, okay? I would say look for it on that off day, Thursday, after the Boston series. Let's count on that being the next episode. And also, I want to tell you, we got some very exciting stuff coming down the pipeline in June. We're really going to start pumping out some social media content, some videos. We want some fan interactions, going to be asking for fan questions. We're going to really have a lot of stuff coming, and I believe that's starting just in a couple days. Maybe even by next episode. All right, gang. So with that being said, this was another episode of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. Let's go.
Talking baseball, baseball.